The email that destroyed my old company sat in my inbox for over a year before I realized what I was looking at. I was in my cramped Denver kitchen, in the same faded Target leggings I'd basically lived in since getting fired, scrolling through my old Summit Ridge work email like some kind of emotional self-harm. When I opened it, subject line, please delete all prior HR complaints from personnel files. It was from our HR director. CCD to my harasser. And by some small stupid miracle be CCD to me. I stared at that screen while my cheap apartment fridge rattled in the background and my heart pounded so loud it felt like the walls could hear it. Because that one overlooked email proved two things at the same time. 1. I hadn't been crazy. 2. They hadn't just fired me for performance issues. They had fired me for reporting harassment. And HR had literally ordered people to destroy complaints. That little email thread, sitting there since the 12th of August 2019, was the crack in the dam. And once I pushed on it, it didn't just drown my old company, it turned into a full-blown class action lawsuit. Before I tell you how I went from cardboard box fire to legal nightmare for my old employer, I want to say this. If you're listening to this while hiding in a bathroom stall at work, or doom scrolling on your couch after some HR meeting made you feel insane, you are not alone. If you care about stories where people like us actually get justice for once, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, whatever button you've got in front of you. The more people hear stories like this, the fewer companies get away with burying complaints and gaslighting employees into silence. Okay, deep breath. Let's go back to where this started. The dream job and the man in the Patagonia vest. My name is Megan Holt. I'm 32 now, but when all of this started I was 28 and aggressively average. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment off Colorado Boulevard in Denver, Colorado. If you've ever driven that stretch, you know exactly the vibe. Chain restaurants, strip malls, Subaru after Subaru, and in the distance, the Rockies looking way more peaceful than my bank account. My life was a boring little American loop. Wake up at 6:30. Scroll Instagram for 10 minutes I didn't really have. Fight mild I-25 traffic. Hit the Starbucks drive-thru near Cherry Creek for a grande iced caramel macchiato with caramel drizzle I absolutely could not afford. Drive my 2011 Honda Civic to an office park that looked like every other beige glass rectangle in America. The sign out front said, Summit Ridge Analytics, in those sleek blue letters that scream we do something with data that normal people don't understand. Officially I was an account implementation specialist. Unofficial translation? I did the thankless technical groundwork that makes big corporate loyalty programs and customer analytics go from PowerPoint idea to something the client could actually log into. I lived inside spreadsheets, Jira tickets, and quick 15-minute sync. Calendar invites. The pay, $58,000 a year. The benefits, mediocre health insurance, 401k match that felt like a participation trophy. The sales pitch, we're a growing tech company with great culture. The thing is, at first, I actually kind of loved it. Our floor had big windows with a partial view of the Rockies if you squinted past other office buildings. On Fridays, people brought in King Soopers donuts and left them in the kitchen. In the summer, we'd walk over to the food trucks that parked near the office park and argue about which one had the best tacos. We had a super Target not far away, and every couple of weeks someone would yell, "Anyone need anything from Target?" My little work family was Jess, another implementation specialist, late 30s, mom of 2, commute in from Aurora, lived on iced coffee and dark humor. Tyler, junior analyst, nerdy, always talking about his D&D campaign and asking me to sanity check his dashboards. Rachel, project manager, in her mid-30s, who alternated between office big sister and agent of chaos depending on the day. We had a group chat where we sent memes about bad clients and cursed at Jira. We joked about quitting to open a bar, like every burnt-out office worker in America. We had our unofficial PTO hacks call it a dentist appointment instead of, I am dying inside and need to lie down for 3 hours. It felt Safe, boring, predictable, safe. And then Brad showed up. Brad, the harasser in a Patagonia vest. His name was Brad Lawson, of course it was. He came in as the new director of client success. Mid-40s, Patagonia vest over a button-down. The type of jawline you see in bank commercials. That thin layer of, I ran a half marathon last weekend and posted about it on LinkedIn energy. On his first week, he did the classic I'll just wander around and introduce myself to everyone routine. He stopped at my desk, leaned against the cubicle wall like we were in some fake workplace sitcom, and said, "So you're Megan. I've heard good things. Implementation, right?" His smile was all teeth. "Yeah," I said, doing that polite office chuckle. "I make the magic actually work." He did that full humble laugh. "You and me both. I like to think of myself as the glue between clients and the nerds." I remember thinking, okay, kind of annoying, but whatever. For a while, that's all. He was annoying but harmless. He'd drop by with his reusable coffee cup, ask how things were going, throw corporate buzzwords around like confetti. Except he was good at something I didn't recognize as a red flag at the time. He remembered things. I mentioned my wife Emily once in passing how she dragged me to the Cherry Creek Farmers Market on weekends. He filed it away. Next time he came by my desk, "How's Emily? Still making you wake up early for those farmers markets?" He remembered that Tyler's dog's name was Pixel. Jess's youngest had asthma. Rachel preferred tea to coffee, my favorite donut, maple bar. Everyone thought it was impressive. "He's so attentive," someone said. "I see it differently now." He was building a map, measuring who we were, where our weak spots might be, how close he could push. Because then he started remembering things he shouldn't. The first line crossed. The first time Brad crossed a line, it was so small I almost gaslit myself out of noticing it. We were in conference room C, going over a new implementation for this mid-sized retail chain. Just me, Brad, and Rachel. I'd pulled up a mess of database triggers and customer segmentation rules on the big wall monitor, walking them through how their loyalty tiers would update overnight. I'm in my lane, talking fast, pointing at the screen with my little Summit Ridge pen, feeling really proud of how smooth I've made this complicated process. Brad gets up from his chair and comes around behind me. "Mind if I get closer?" he says. I'm a visual thinker. He stands behind my chair. His hand lands on the back of it. Fine. Whatever. Then it slides down, onto my shoulder. Then just a little lower. Not full-on grabbing. Just hovering in that gray area where you can almost convince yourself it's nothing. His fingers press lightly into the top of my arm. I go rigid inside my own skin. I can feel every nerve in that shoulder screaming, but outwardly I keep talking about trigger logic like nothing is happening. Rachel's still seated, staring at the screen, but I can feel her body go still in that way women do when we're silently clocking something. After what felt like 15 minutes but was probably 3 seconds, Brad squeezes my shoulder, "Let's go," and says, "You're really good at this, Megan. We should get you in front of more clients." My face is hot. My stomach is cold. We wrap the meeting. I grab my notebook like it's a life raft and head for the hallway. Rachel catches up with me near the printers. She lowers her voice. Was that just me, or was he way too handsy in there? I give that automatic nervous laugh. Yeah, I noticed. Did he do that before? Not like that, I say. Maybe he's just touchy? Rachel gives me this look. Eyebrows slightly raised, lips pressed together. Well, I've worked with a lot of touchy guys that felt extra. I shrug because what else am I supposed to do? March straight to HR over a shoulder squeeze I can't even put words to yet? I go back to my desk, open a random email, and stare at the screen while my heart thuds. In my head, I start the bargaining. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe he didn't realize. Maybe I'm overreacting. I didn't realize that was the first test. And once I didn't push back, he knew how far he could move the line. You're a very marketable face. A few weeks later, Summit Ridge decided it wanted to look more like a real tech company. New website, new brand photos. A cringe sizzle reel for conferences. Some consultant came in and told our leadership we needed human faces to our data solutions, and suddenly everyone in marketing was talking about authentic employee stories. One afternoon, I'm refilling my chipped, world's okayest employee mug with burnt break room coffee when Brad corners me by the Keurig. "Megan," he says, leaning against the counter like he's about to pitch me a startup. "We're putting together visuals for the new site. I told the team you'd be perfect." "Perfect?" I say, bewildered. "I break Excel for a living," he chuckles. "Exactly. We're highlighting people who actually do the work. You've got that girl next door thing going on. Tech savvy, but approachable. Clients respond to that. You're a very marketable face for the company. On the surface, okay, kind of weird but fine. People get chosen for marketing stuff all the time." I give that awkward laugh. Thanks." He drops his voice half an octave. I dug up the number for attorney number 2 Mark Daniels from my call history. My thumb hovered over the screen for half a second. Part of me whispered, "What if you're misreading this?" The other part whispered back, "You've spent months wondering if you made this up. This is proof." I hit call. "Daniels Law," his receptionist answered. "Hi, this is Megan Holt," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I spoke to Mark a while back about a potential retaliation case. I think I just found something important." They squeezed me in the next afternoon. This changes everything. Mark's office was in one of those older brick buildings downtown, a few blocks from the Denver City and County building with its big white columns and constant protest banners. His name was on a little brass plaque next to the elevator. Inside, things were quiet. The waiting room had a coffee machine that hissed and a stack of outdated magazines. I sat there bouncing my leg until his assistant called my name. Mark was in his 40s, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, that controlled energy vibe of someone who lives on deadlines and caffeine. "Good to see you again, Megan," he said, shaking my hand. "Come on in." I sat down. My mouth was dry. "I found something in my old work email," I said, pulling out my laptop with shaking hands. "I think it's important, but I need you to tell me." I opened the email, turned the screen so he could see. He leaned in, reading silently. As his eyes moved down the text, his eyebrows lifted a fraction. Then his jaw tightened. He scrolled back up, checked the sender, the recipients, the date. He looked at me closely. "You're sure you didn't alter this?" he asked, looking at me carefully. I almost laughed. "I would know how even if I wanted to. It's still on their server. I logged in from my old account yesterday." He nodded slowly. "This," he said, tapping the screen with one finger. "This changes everything." My heart leapt and stuttered at the same time. "In what way?" He sat back, steepling his fingers like every lawyer in every movie except this was about my life. "Okay," he said. "Let me break this down." He went into lawyer mode for me. He spoke in plain language. When an employee files a complaint of harassment or discrimination, the company has a legal obligation to preserve those records. They can't just clean up or delete drafts that document what was said. That's especially true once they're on notice of potential legal exposure. He clicked the email again. This line, "Recent internal complaints about director-level staff," is key. It shows they knew there were complaints about people in leadership. And instead of preserving that, your HR director told her team to delete notes. That's illegal? I asked. He confirmed it with a nod. In layman's terms, it's called spoliation of evidence, he said. Courts really don't like it when companies destroy evidence. Juries like it even less. So what does that mean for me? I asked. It means he said, she said, just turned into they tried to bury this. He paused. And it might not just be you, I frowned. What do you mean? If they're deleting notes about complaints plural, that suggests there were others, he said. Other people who came forward about directors and got the same treatment, like Rachel. Like the weird tense way she talked. Like Jess's I've seen him get weird comment. Are you saying, I started? I'm saying we might be looking at something systemic, not just one bad incident, Mark said. If we can find others, we're no longer talking about a single retaliation claim. We might be looking at a lawsuit. He said it might be a class action lawsuit. I'd only ever heard that phrase in commercials, if you or a loved one has been affected by. Now it was being used in the same sentence as my old company. He met my eyes. If you're willing, let's start. I'd like to take this on. We'll start with an EEOC charge, harassment and retaliation, and use discovery to see what else is there. In the meantime, I'm going to start quietly looking for other victims. Other victims, I repeated, the words landing with a strange mix of horror and validation. It wasn't just me. Maybe I hadn't just failed to handle one creepy boss. Maybe I stumbled onto the tip of something bigger. Okay, I said finally. For the first time in months, my voice felt steady. Let's do it. Finding the others. The next year was hard. The next year of my life could be summed up as, wait, work, dig, repeat. Mark filed a charge with the EEOC on my behalf. Pages and pages of narrative. How Brad harassed me, what I reported, what HR did, the firing, and now this. While that was simmering, Mark started doing something else. He went fishing. He posted discreet notices on legal forums and employment boards. Former employees of a mid-sized analytics firm in Denver who reported harassment or experienced retaliation are encouraged to contact our office. He was looking for more people. He connected with a private investigator who specialized in corporate cases. And he told me to reach out to the people I trusted. Don't push anyone, he said. Just let them know you have counsel and ask if they ever had issues with HR over harassment complaints. Some might wait. So I texted Jess. Me, hey, super sensitive question. Did you ever file anything with HR about Brad or anyone else? She replied fast. Jess, not officially. They called me in about your complaint. I backed you up. They asked if I wanted to file my own. I refused. I said I didn't want drama. Wish I had now. I texted Rachel. Me, did you ever file anything with HR about Brad? It took her a while to respond. When she did, it was a wall of text. Rachel, yeah, once. After he made a comment. He commented on how my dress was distracting in front of a vendor. I went to HR. Lindsay took notes. Marianne later pulled me aside and said making a formal complaint would escalate tensions and that they'd coach him informally. She told me to think about my future. She told me to think about my long-term relationship with the company. My stomach turned. Me. I have an email from Marianne telling HR to delete notes about complaints against director-level staff, sent a week after my complaint. My lawyer says it's a big deal. Her reply came back. Her reply was in all caps. Rachel, are you serious? A few minutes later my phone rang. What do we do? She asked, voice shaking. I've got a lawyer, I said. He thinks there might be others. Do you want his number? Yes, she said, no hesitation. She wanted in. Within weeks, Rachel was talking to Mark. So was a woman I'd only vaguely known from the analytics team, Amanda, who left a year before me. Her story made my blood boil. Different director, same pattern, creepy comments. HR coaching, retaliation. Pushed out in a restructuring. It was a pattern. The more we talked, the more familiar it all sounded. Like we all been given the same script with our names swapped. Mark started connecting the dots. We're up to 6 women with similar stories. He told me one afternoon over the phone. Different departments, different managers. Same patterns, same HR patterns, and we have your email showing they deleted notes. That's enough to explore a class action. It was like pulling on a thread of one ugly sweater and realizing the whole closet was about to unravel. Lawsuits, depositions, and watching them fall. Things were moving fast now. On March 15, 2021, Mark filed the complaint in federal court. Holt et al. v. Summit Ridge Analytics, LLC. It looks so strange, seeing my last name there. Not on a badge or a payroll stub, but at the front of a legal case. The claims were serious. The claims were a legal alphabet soup. Title 7 Sex-based harassment, retaliation, hostile work environment, negligent HR practices, spoliation of evidence. Summit Reg, of course, denied everything. In their response, they painted themselves as a company of integrity, committed to fairness, all that stuff. We were disgruntled former employees with misperceptions and unfounded allegations. But as Mark kept reminding me, they can deny all they want. The documents will tell their own story. And thanks to my little overlooked email, those documents were about to become their worst nightmare. Discovery was the next step. Discovery, when their secrets became evidence. If the complaint is the opening punch, discovery is the long grinding body blow in a lawsuit. Mark sent requests demanding everything. All HR complaints involving director-level staff for the last 5 years. All notes, drafts, and communications related to harassment reports. He wanted internal emails about complaint handling procedures, performance reviews and termination records for everyone who'd reported harassment. Summit Ridge stalled, objected, claimed some things were not reasonably accessible. The judge who, based on her written orders, clearly had no patience for games forced them to produce what they had for us. What they had was damning. From their own records, we learned, my official complaint file consisted of one line in a generic HR system. Spoke with employee re. Concern about director communication style, matter resolved. No investigation notes. No witness statements. Rachel's complaint didn't exist anywhere. It was not a formal report, not even as an informal concern. It was like she never walked into HR. There were entire weeks where HR had no notes about anything, which, in a company of that size, was laughable. People complain about chair height and noise. The idea that nothing happened those weeks was absurd. A Slack message from Marianne to another HR staffer saying, "We need to be very careful about what we keep on file. Leadership doesn't want a paper trail for gray area complaints." When Mark read that, he laughed. She folded her hands. Mr. Lawson vehemently denies any inappropriate intent. He reports that any physical contact was accidental or part of his general coaching style, which he describes as hands-on and encouraging. With regard to the marketable face comment, he states that he was referring to representation in marketing materials. He said he was not referring to your appearance. I stared at her like she started speaking another language. Lindsay wouldn't meet my eyes, so nothing happens. I said, "We have reminded Mr. Lawson of our expectations around professional boundaries," Marianne said. "We're considering this a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. Her voice went softer by half a degree. "If any new incidents occur, of course, you can always bring them to HR again." I walked out of that conference room feeling like I'd just been hit by a car nobody else saw. By the time I reached my desk, the narrative changed. Maybe I did overreact. Maybe I read too much into it. Maybe I made a big deal out of nothing. And then the retaliation started. We don't tolerate retaliation. They definitely did. HR loves to say, "We don't tolerate retaliation," the way toddlers love to say, "I'll share." Within a month of that misunderstanding meeting, my entire work life shifted. A promotion I'd been informally promised literally, my manager has said, "You're next in line. We'll make it official," after Q2 went to a guy who'd been there half as long and routinely dumped his work on other people. I was pulled off 2 of my favorite clients with no explanation. One of them ended up on Brad's pet employees roster. My once glowering performance reviews suddenly sprouted phrases like, "Can be a bit resistant to feedback and could work on being more of a team player." Brad started nitpicking everything. "Megan, please see attached. We need to be more detail-oriented on these imports going forward." He'd CC Marianne on emails about the most minor issues, a mislabeled column, a ticket updated an hour late. Stuff that would have been a 5-minute conversation before. Every time I saw Marianne's name, my stomach clenched. Sleep went first. I'd lie awake in our dark bedroom, watching the orange glow from the streetlights' paint stripes on the ceiling while my brain ran in circles. Did I mess up that migration? Am I really not a team player? Are they building a case to get rid of me? During the day, my hands would shake so much I mistyped passwords 3 times before getting into systems. I started skipping lunch either because my stomach hurt or because I had so many urgent tasks dropped on me. One afternoon, I was standing in the break room, fridge door open, staring at pasta. I was just staring like it might have the answer when Tyler walked in. "You good?" he asked. I realized I'd been standing there long enough for the fridge to start beeping. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." He shut the fridge door for me. He lowered his voice. "Jess told me about Brad," he said. "For what it's worth, I've noticed he's been weirdly on your case lately." I tried to shrug it off. HR said they couldn't substantiate anything. So I guess I misread it. Tyler made a face. "Yeah, or they just don't want to rock the boat." "They don't want to rock the boat with a director," he said. "You've been crushing it since you got here, you know that, right?" I nodded, but the words didn't sink in. The story in my head was already louder. "You're the problem. You made a fuss. Now they're correcting you." I wish I could say I recognized retaliation for what it was right then. Instead, I just worked harder, stayed later, double-checked everything, smiled more, and it still wasn't enough. The day they fired me, if you've ever been fired, you know there's a certain vibe in the air before it happens. People avoid eye contact. Slack goes quiet. Your manager suddenly gets formal. For me, it was a Wednesday. I was in the middle of testing a data import when a Slack notification popped up from Brad. "Can you step into conference room D real quick?" No agenda, no warning. My pulse shot up so fast I could feel it in my fingertips. When I walked into conference room D, Brad and Marianne were already seated. No water, no printouts in front of me. Just a manila folder by Marianne's elbow and the kind of tense silence that makes your ears ring. "Megan," Brad began, hitting me with his serious but compassionate leader voice. "Thanks for joining us." Marianne slid the folder toward me like it might explode. "We've been reviewing performance across the department," she said. "Unfortunately, due to ongoing performance concerns, we've made the decision to terminate your employment effective immediately." It was like someone hit mute on the world. "Performance concerns," I finally managed. "What performance concerns?" Brad opened the folder, flipping to a page like he was showing off a prize. "We've documented several incidents," he said, tapping the paper. "Missed deadlines on the Fairview account. Errors in the Winston migration." He mentioned communication issues with the support team. I skimmed the list. My vision blurred, but not enough to miss what was happening. One missed deadline was a project where he had changed the scope at the last minute. Another error was a data glitch we caught and fixed before it hit. The communication issues were literally a thread where I chased support for updates they hadn't given me. "My metrics are fine," I said, feeling heat rise up my neck. "My clients are happy, you know that." Marianne's expression didn't change. "The decision is final," she said. "You'll receive severance. You'll receive 2 weeks severance, contingent on signing this release." She slid another document toward me. Legalese, paragraphs, and paragraphs of, "You can't sue us or say anything bad about us if you want this money." I flipped through it, heart hammering. I'd done enough compliance training to know what I saw. My eyes snagged on a clause about waiving any claims, including those related to discrimination or retaliation. I looked up. "You're firing me because I reported harassment," I said. The words came out flatter than I felt. Brad's jaw tightened. "That's not what this is about." Marianne added her advice. "We strongly advise you to consult an attorney before making unfounded accusations. There was a beat of silence where I swear I could hear my own heartbeat bouncing off the glass walls. Part of me wanted to sign, take the pathetic 2 weeks, crawl home. Forget any of this ever happened. Another part of me thought about Jess's texts. Tyler's face. Emily's voice saying, "You don't have to be the cool, chill coworker when your boss is crossing lines." I set the pen down. "I'm not signing this," I said. Brad's eyes narrowed. Marianne's lips thinned. "That is your choice." "That is, of course, your choice," she said. "But your termination is still effective today." They walked me back to my desk like a criminal. Gave me a cardboard box. "You have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings," Marianne said, just loud enough for nearby desks to hear. I put my sad little plans in the box, my notebooks. The mug Emily had bought me that said, "Powered by coffee and spreadsheets." Jess stood up and hugged me in front of everyone, eyes shiny. "This is bullshit." Tyler just shook his head. "Text us," he said. "Seriously. Don't disappear." I took the elevator down one last time, the box digging into my palms, the lobby suddenly feeling huge and foreign. Outside, the Colorado sky was offensively blue. I stood on the sidewalk of that generic office park, watching people swipe their badges and go in and out. It felt like nothing had changed, and I realized my entire life had just been rerouted without my consent. I put the box in my Civic, sat in the driver's seat, and finally let myself cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs. Just that quiet, shaking kind where your lungs forget. Everything felt too bright. I wish I could tell you that right then, in that parking lot, I vowed revenge. I didn't. I just wanted to go home, crawl into bed, and never have to say per my last email ever again. The thing nobody tells you is how quiet it gets. No pings, no quick questions, no calendar invites, just silence. For the first few weeks, that silence felt like relief. Then it started to feel like freefall. The lost months and the email that changed everything. The day after Summit Ridge fired me, I woke up at 7:15. I woke up out of habit, rolled over, grabbed my phone to check email, and there was nothing. No overnight client panic. No, "Can we move this call?" No friendly reminder from a project manager. Just spam, a King Soopers coupon, and an automated notification from my student loan servicer. Reality hit like a slow wave. I was unemployed. Unemployment, and maybe I was the problem loop. I did what I was supposed to do. I filed for unemployment with the Colorado Department of Labor. Sat at my kitchen table, clicking through questions about termination reasons and prior wages. I was pretending the words, "fired for performance," weren't echoing in my head. A week later, I got the first deposit. It wasn't a lot, but it kept us from drowning immediately. Emily picked up extra shifts. She worked at a small physical therapy clinic near Washington Park and started Saturdays. We cut back on everything. No more random Target trips. No more takeout just because we're tired. The Cherry Creek Starbucks became a luxury. I scroll past on my app instead of drive-through. I sent out resumes, tweaked my LinkedIn, wrote cover letters that tried very hard to sound stable. I tried to sound like a competent, stable adult instead of, "I cried in my car yesterday because I saw a Subaru that looked like Brad's." But the thing that ate at me most wasn't the money. It was the doubt. In the middle of the night, questions crept in. What if I really wasn't performing? What if I was too sensitive? What if the knee touch was just an awkward drunk moment I blew out of proportion? What if HR was right and it was all just a misunderstanding? Emily tried to fight those thoughts off for me. One night, I sat on the floor in our living room, surrounded by crumpled printouts of my old performance reviews. Exceeds expectations, strong client relationships, detail-oriented and reliable, and I still heard Marianne's voice saying, "ongoing performance concerns." "I don't get it," I said, tugging at a loose thread. How can I go from exceeds expectations to "you're fired" in under a year unless I changed? Emily sat across from me, cross-legged, holding my hand. "You didn't change," she said. What changed was that you dared to say, "Hey, maybe don't put your hand on my knee under a table." I laughed, but it came out sharp. Yeah, and look how well that worked out. She squeezed my fingers. They retaliated. That's not on you. Then how come I'm the one sitting at home filling out unemployment forms while Brad gets to stroll around in his Patagonia vest? I asked why he got to pretend he's a feminist. She didn't have an answer for that. So I did what most people do when they've been wronged by a system bigger than them. At first, I tried to fight it. Then slowly I started to give up. The lawyers who said, probably not worth it. In the first few weeks, when the anger was still hot instead of just heavy, I called a couple of employment lawyers. Google Denver employment attorney, and you get a list of smiling headshots and words like justice and wrongful termination. I picked 2 firms that offered free consultations. Attorney number 1 talked to me over the phone while someone typed loudly in the background. Retaliation cases are tough, he said. Do you have anything written that ties your HR complaint to your termination? I mean, no, I said, pacing my room. The timing lines up. I reported him. They said they couldn't substantiate it. Then my reviews tanked and they fired me. But no email saying, "We're firing you because you complained," he clarified. Well, obviously not, I snapped, then immediately apologized. He sighed in that tired lawyer way. I'm not saying you weren't wronged. But without a smoking gun, a document, an email these cases come down to, he said, she said, and companies always have more resources. You could file with the EEOC, but it's a long road and the outcome is uncertain. Translation, not profitable enough. Attorney number 2 was a guy named Mark Daniels. His assistant scheduled a phone consult. He listened more than he talked. Asked questions about the HR investigation, about my reviews, about time frame. When I finished, he said pretty much the same thing. I believe you, he said, and I swallowed. He was the first person from the company to say that. But belief isn't what wins cases. Evidence is. If you don't have documentation, we're relying on patterns and inference. It's not impossible, but it's uphill. Do people ever win without a smoking gun? I asked him hopefully. Sometimes, he said. But I won't lie to you, it's rare. Companies are very good at covering their asses. By the end of the call, I felt like someone had let the air out of me. I thanked him. Hung up. Any luck? Emily asked from the kitchen. They said it'd be hard, I said. Basically that unless I have emails, they can't do much. She frowned. You don't have anything? Performance reviews, Slack messages, anything? HR has everything, I said. All I've got is my memory and a severance agreement I didn't sign. I watched hope flicker in her eyes and then dim. For a while after that, I didn't call any more lawyers. I decided my revenge would just be building a better life somewhere else. Get another job. Pretend Summit Ridge never existed. Except the universe wasn't done. The temporary job and the therapy app, months blurred. I picked up a temp job as a front desk admin at a dental office on Colfax. $18 an hour, no benefits. My job was to smile, check people in, and pretend I didn't hear the drills. On weekends, I sometimes did DoorDash runs in my Civic, weaving between downtown and Capitol Hill, dropping hot Cheetos and Chipotle at apartment buildings with peeling paint and overfilled mailboxes. The woman who'd once managed 6-figure client accounts now praised someone would tip more than $3 for a burrito. I also started therapy through one of those online apps, you know, the ones where you text a counselor and occasionally do video calls. I couldn't afford in-person, full-price therapy, but this was something. My therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Lang, said things to help me. It's not just the loss of income you're grieving, it's the loss of trust. You did what you were told you should do, report harassment through proper channels, and you were punished for it. I don't trust HR anymore, I told her once, curling up on the couch. That's understandable, she said. HR exists to protect the company, not the individual. That doesn't mean there aren't good people in HR, but structurally their allegiance is to risk mitigation, not justice. So what am I supposed to do with all this anger? I asked her then. It's not like I can march into Brad's house and yell at him. Sometimes anger is what keeps us from collapsing, she said. It's protective. But long term, it eats you alive if it doesn't have somewhere to go. At the time, I didn't know where it would go. I didn't know it would go to a courthouse. But first, it had to sit, ferment, and then an automated email reminder would kick the whole thing off. The overlooked email. It was early October, a little over 7 months after I got fired. Outside, things were changing. The trees along Colorado Boulevard had gone from green to orange. Halloween decorations were already popping up on porches, plastic skeletons, and cheap spider webs. I was doing what I did too often back then, half watching some Netflix show I wouldn't remember and half scrolling through my phone to avoid work. I was avoiding the job applications tab I kept meaning to open. An email notification popped up from an address I hadn't seen in a while. No-reply@summitridgeanalytics.com. Subject: Notice: your Summit Ridge email account will be deleted in 7 days. Oh, I muttered. Guess they finally noticed. Technically, I wasn't supposed to have access anymore. Somehow, nobody had fully shut down my account. I'd gotten a couple of these warnings before and ignored them. This time curiosity won. I padded over to the kitchen table, opened my beat-up laptop, and typed in my old password. It worked. The screen filled with a familiar layout of my Summit Ridge inbox, folders, color-coded labels. Hundreds of unread messages I'd never see. For a moment, I just sat there, staring. It felt like looking at a ghost of my past life. I started clicking around, old client threads, calendar invites, system notifications, the occasional meme from Tyler. Then, because self-sabotage is apparently one of my love languages, I searched my own name. Dozens of hits came up: performance reviews, feedback threads, random, great job on this, Megan. Notes as saved because I was that person. Buried in there, about 10 pages back, was an email with a subject line that made my skin prickle. Please delete all prior HR complaints from personnel files. It was from Marianne. Sent about a week after my HR investigation had been officially closed. My stomach tightened. I clicked it. The to field shows some internal HR group. The CC line had Brad's name on it, and the BCC line had men. I frowned, confused. Why the hell would Marianne BCC me on internal HR housekeeping? Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she'd meant someone else. I started reading. Per guidance from leadership, please ensure any informal HR notes or complaint drafts not included in finalized reports are removed from personnel files and digital folders. This includes preliminary notes related to recent internal complaints about director-level staff. My heart started pounding so loudly I heard it. We want to make sure only substantiated findings are reflected. Please confirm completion by EA the 12th of August 2019. I read it again and again. Informal HR notes or complaint drafts. Recent internal complaints about director-level staff. Removed from personnel files and digital folders. My hands went cold. They were talking about me. They were talking about my complaint. About Brad. About any notes Lindsay had taken. This wasn't cleaning up drafts. This was literally, delete the evidence. I scrolled up, checked the date. August 12, 2019. Right after they told me they couldn't substantiate anything. They were hiding the truth. Somewhere between hitting send on that email and whoever clicked delete on those notes, Marianne had accidentally BCC'd the wrong person, me, and I had opened it back then, misread it as generic HR clutter, and filed it away in some mental drawer labeled not my problem. Now it was. Now it was very much my problem. I sat there, alone at my wobbly kitchen table, my cheap fridge humming, the late afternoon Denver sun slanting through the blinds, staring at what might as well have been a smoking gun. The rage that flooded me wasn't hot this time. It was cold, focused. They hadn't just failed me. They had deliberately erased my complaint and then fired me. And they'd put their intent in writing, forward, save, screenshot, lawyer. For the first time in months, my brain clicked into something that felt like work mode. Step 1. Step 1. Get it out of their system. I forwarded the email to my personal Gmail, then I downloaded it as a PDF, then I screenshotted it on my phone. I probably could have etched it into stone, the way my hands were moving. Step 2. Call Mark. Plus, it'll be nice to have something better to look at conferences, you know? My stomach drops. He smiles like he just told a cute little joke. Then he grabs his coffee and walks away before I can even fully register it. I stand there staring at the Keurig as it sputters, my hand shaking just enough that coffee sloshes onto my fingers. That night, I'm on the couch in our Denver apartment with takeout Thai spread on the coffee table pad, seaweed for me, green curry for Emily. Snowflakes are drifting outside, catching the streetlights along Colorado Boulevard. I tell her what Brad said. Her reaction is immediate, no hesitation. That's gross, she says, chopsticks in midair. Megan, that's not just awkward. That's gross. I shrug like he's not eating me alive. Maybe he was just trying to be funny? She gives me the look. Anyone in a long-term relationship knows the look. It's part concern. Part, I know you're downplaying this because you hate conflict. You're allowed to have boundaries at work, she says. You don't have to be the cool, chill coworker when your boss is objectifying you. I pick at my noodles. I really like this job. They've been hinting at promotions. The benefits are... Okay, you liking your job doesn't mean they get to treat you like this, she says. I nod, but inside I'm doing the math. Health insurance versus discomfort. Promotions versus being that woman who complained. I wish I could tell you I marched into HR the next day. I didn't. I went back to work. I smiled. I laughed at jokes. I stayed late to fix broken SQL queries, and Brad kept pushing. The trip, the report, and the investigation. The conference in Chicago was my first real work trip. I remember being stupidly excited in that way you get when you've never traveled for work before. I packed my good blazer, the one pair of heels I owned that didn't totally murder my feet. I had a navy dress I bought on clearance at Kohl's because it felt professional. We flew out of Denver International on a Monday morning. Jess and I sat together, sharing earbuds and laughing at some true crime podcast while Tyler snored on the other side of the aisle. Brad moved up and down the plane like he owned it. In Chicago, we checked into this big chain hotel near the convention center, the kind with neutral art and carpet designed to hide stains. I remember standing at the window of my standard issue room, looking down at the city lights and thinking, wow, I'm really doing this. I'm a real professional. I wish that feeling had lasted. Team drinks, non-negotiable. After a day of back-to-back client sessions and panel talks where nothing actually got decided, Brad announced, team drinks at the hotel bar. 7 p.m., non-negotiable. Megan, you're definitely coming. Our clients love you. That last sentence should have felt like a compliment. Instead, it landed like a weight. By 7:15, we were crowded around a high-top table in the hotel bar, too loud, too full of men in lanyards. Brad kept ordering rounds of old fashions for the table, like the company card was burning a hole in his pocket. I started with a beer, switched to water. I like a drink as much as anyone, but I've worked enough corporate events to know, drunk women get remembered in a way drunk men don't. At some point, Brad slid off the bar stool across from me and moved to the empty one at my side. Gotta sit next to our rising star, he joked. His knee was knocking into mine under the table. His thigh stayed there, pressed against mine. The bar stool suddenly felt about 3 inches wide. I tried to shift away, but the stool screeched on the floor and I felt eyes flick towards us, so I froze. You're killing it this week, he said. He was leaning in so close I could smell the whiskey on his breath and the faint cologne under it. The Fairview retail guy told me you're the reason they're going to renew. That's good, I said, focusing on a water ring on the table. We could really use that revenue next quarter, he laughed low. Then his hand slid onto my knee, under the table. My whole body went cold. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a bump. His hand rested there, heavy, claiming. Every neuron in my brain lit up at once. Move, say something, laugh it off. Slap his hand away. Don't make a scene. You're overreacting. You're not overreacting. I stared straight ahead, smiling weakly at some joke I didn't hear, feeling the weight of his hand like it was glued to my skin. Across the table, Jess caught my eye. I watched her expression change: confusion, realization, anger. Her phone buzzed. Mine buzzed a second later. Jess, you okay? Want me to need you in my room? I swallowed hard, forced my face into something approximating normal, and typed back under the table, me, please. 2 minutes later, Jess stood up. Oh my god, Megan, she said, putting on a too bright smile. I totally forgot I needed your help. I need you to help with something on my laptop. Can you come look at it before I send it to the client? Brad's hand squeezed my knee once before he let go. Don't be a stranger, he murmured in my ear as I slid off the bar stool. We're not done celebrating. In the elevator, with the doors finally closed, I exhaled so hard my lungs hurt. Jess turned to me, eyes wide. That was not okay, she said. You know that, right? I nodded. My throat felt like it had a fist wrapped around it. I think I'm going to talk to HR. I'll talk to them when we get back, I said, the words tasting like metal. Jess nodded immediately. Good, I'll back you up. I've seen him get weird with Rachel too. You shouldn't have to deal with that shit. That was the first time I said it out loud like some kind of spell. I'm going to report him. The HR room with the mini Snickers. Back in Denver, the office felt different. Same beige walls, same hum of fluorescent lights, same view of the snow-dusted mountains in the distance. But every time Brad walked past my desk, my body went rigid. I gave it a few days. Told myself I was just thinking it through. What I was actually doing was bargaining with myself. Finally, one Tuesday morning I walked past the HR office 3 times before I forced myself to knock. Hey Megan. That was Lindsay, our HR generalist. She was early 30s, had a soft voice, wore a cardigan, and had a bowl of mini Snickers on her desk like some kind of goodwill altar. Do you have a few minutes? I asked. Of course, she said. Come on in. I closed the door behind me. That tiny click sounded louder. She gestured to the chair. I sat. My palms were sweating so much I left damp marks on my notebook. So, she said, that HR tone dialed to soothing. What's going on? And then I told her. I told her about the hand on my shoulder in conference room C, the marketable face comment by the Keurig, the hand on my knee under the table in Chicago, the way he leaned in, the smell of his drink, the way I froze. Lindsay nodded slowly, typing notes into a generic HR system I recognized from the onboarding training. Thank you for bringing this to us, she said. I know that isn't easy. We take these things very seriously. She asked if there were witnesses. I gave her Jess's name. I mentioned Rachel seeing him get handsy. Then she said, because Brad is a director, we'll need to loop in Marianne. Marianne is our HR director. She probably handled the follow-up from here. The name Marianne made my stomach twist, and I didn't even know why yet. I seen her around late 40s, sharp suits, sharper eyes, but we'd never really interacted. And Megan, Lindsay added. Retaliation is strictly against company policy. You're protected, okay? She slid the bowl of mini Snickers closer to me like a peace offering. I picked one up just so my hands had something to do. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the posters in the break room about zero tolerance for harassment meant something. I walked back to my desk with my heart pounding and this weird cocktail of relief and dread sloshing in my chest. In my inbox, a new meeting invite popped up. Follow-up HR attendees. Marianne, HR Director, Megan Holt. My mouth went dry. The investigation. Over the next 2 weeks, small things happened that made me think the system might actually work. Jess got called into HR. She later told me she'd confirmed everything she saw. Rachel got pulled in too. She said she'd mentioned weird vibes from Brad, how he stood too close and commented on her clothes. Brad's behavior toward me changed overnight. No more surprise visits at my desk, no more shoulder touches. Every communication suddenly moved to email, sterile and formal. He avoided eye contact in meetings. For a minute I thought, wow, maybe this is what accountability looks like. Then the day came. Conference room B, 2 p.m. I walked in clutching my notebook like a shield. Marianne was already there, sitting at the head of the table. Her expression was neutral in that way that feels somehow less than neutral. Lindsay sat off to the side, laptop open, eyes down. Megan, Marianne said crisply. Please have a seat. If Lindsay was cardigan and Snickers HR, Marianne was spreadsheet and risk mitigation HR. Her blazer probably cost more than my rent. She launched straight in. We've concluded our review of the concerns you raised regarding Brad Lawson, she said. We spoke with the individuals you mentioned. We also spoke with Mr. Lawson himself. My heart climbed up into my throat. Unfortunately, she continued, we were not able to substantiate a pattern of harassment that meets the standard for disciplinary action. It felt like the air got sucked out of the room. What does that mean? I finally asked. He laughed the disbelieving kind. They might as well have written, we're going to break best practices now, he said. Summit. Ridge tried to spin all of this as streamlining documentation, but judges and juries don't like it when streamlining just happens to erase every trace of people complaining. They don't like it when it involves powerful men. Deposition day, being picked apart. If you've never been deposed, imagine the worst performance review of your life, except every word is recorded and the person across the table is actively trying to catch you in a lie. It's intense. My deposition was held in a bland downtown conference room with 2 bright fluorescent lighting and a view of the parking garage. There was a court reporter in the corner with a little machine on her lap. Mark sat next to me, legal pad in front of him. Opposite us were lawyers. Across from me, 2 lawyers from the big shiny firm Summit Ridge had hired, both in suits that probably cost more than my rent. They started with basic questions, name, address, work history, then they went in. They asked what I wore to the Chicago conference. They were digging. How many drinks did you have that night? Is it possible you misinterpreted friendly behavior as romantic or sexual because of your own experiences? At one point, one of their lawyers actually said, "You're married to a woman, correct?" "Yes," I said, feeling Mark stiffen beside me. He was ready. "Would you say that affects how you perceive attention from men?" Mark jumped in. "Objection, relevance." The lawyer backpedaled. "I'm just trying to understand the context of her reactions." I answered anyway. "No, being married to a woman doesn't make me hallucinate hands on my knee," I said firmly. They asked if I'd ever had conflicts with managers at previous jobs. They scrutinized every incident they cited on my termination paperwork, trying to paint a picture of me as careless, defensive, oversensitive. Mark objected when they pushed too far, but a lot of it he let through. "Let them see how you handle this," he told me beforehand. Jurors believe people who stay grounded under pressure. I thought about every meeting with Brad where I'd force myself to smile through discomfort. I channeled that, but this time I wasn't pretending nothing was wrong. I was honest. I cried once, quietly, when they asked why I didn't just move on instead of suing. Because if I just moved on, they'd still be doing this to other people, I said. Because they tried to erase what they did to me. It wasn't dramatic. It was just true. Later, Mark told me, that moment, that's why I do this. You were more credible in those 30 seconds than their entire corporate policy manual. Weeks later, Marianne got deposed. I wasn't allowed in the room, but Mark told me how it went. She was under pressure. She tried to say that email was about deleting junk drafts, he said. I showed her the Slack about no paper trail and asked if harassment complaints about directors counted as gray area. She looked like she wanted to dissolve into her chair. He asked her the hard questions. He asked her, point blank, if she'd instructed her team to delete notes about complaints around the time I'd come forward. From the transcript, she danced around it enough that the judge had to force her to give a straight yes/no. She eventually admitted she may have done it. She said she told HR staff to remove sensitive notes from certain files. You could practically hear the judge's eyebrows go up in the margins. Class certification. When it stopped being just me. One of the biggest moments in the case didn't happen in a dramatic courtroom showdown. It happened in a written ruling. To proceed as a class action, the judge had to decide whether enough of us had experienced similar treatment to be treated as a group. Summit Ridge argued we were all unique snowflakes. Different departments, different bosses, different circumstances. Nothing systemic here. Mark laid out the pattern in blunt bullet points. Multiple women in different departments reported sexual harassment or inappropriate conduct by director-level staff. HR either discouraged formal complaints or funneled them into informal coaching with no documentation. The alleged harassers were never meaningfully disciplined. It was clear. Complainants later experienced sudden performance issues, negative reviews, loss of opportunities, and, in several cases, termination or forced resignation. During this period, the HR director instructed staff to delete complaint-related notes and avoid creating a paper trail for gray area issues. The evidence was building up against them. When the judge's order came through, I opened the PDF on my laptop at the same kitchen table where I first stared at that email. Given the consistency of alleged conduct, combined with documentary evidence of HR practices that may have systematically undermined complaint preservation, the court finds sufficient grounds. The court certified the proposed class. I read that sentence over and over. We were no longer just ex-employees with stories. We were legally recognized as a class. Word got around fast. A local business journal ran a piece. Denver data firm faces class action harassment and retaliation suit. It had enough identifying details that anyone who worked at Summit Ridge knew exactly who it was. Tyler texted me a screenshot. Tyler, so your little HR issue is front page in our company Slack now. Me, how bad is it? He replied with the internal reaction to the news. Tyler, we got a company-wide email about false allegations and a disinformation campaign. People aren't buying it. Couple folks asked me if I know you. I told them you're not someone who makes stuff up. More women came forward. A former QA analyst, a current support rep, a marketing coordinator who left after a VP started sending weird late-night texts. The class got bigger, and Summit Ridge's polished great culture image started to crack. Settlement talks, when they finally blinked. I used to think the bad guys always get dragged through some big trial. I thought everyone claps in the end. In real life, companies don't like trials. Trials are public, unpredictable, and make for bad investor calls. So once the class was certified and more ugly internal messages came out in discovery, Summit Ridge did what most corporations do. They finally talked. Their script stopped working. They called Mark. Settlement discussions, he told me, leaning back in his office chair when I came in for a meeting. They're interested. He slid a paper toward me with numbers on it. This was getting very real for all of us involved. This is an initial proposal. They're not admitting wrongdoing, of course, but they're willing to create a settlement fund and implement policy changes. My eyes went straight to the numbers. Total fund, about $2.5 million. After legal fees, that pot will be divided among class members based on several specific factors. It was based on how long we'd worked there, the severity of what we'd endured, and whether we'd been fired. My estimated share, Around $180,000 before taxes. I just stared at it. I thought about my bank account and the hours I'd spent at the dental office. I thought about the DoorDash deliveries up 3 flights of stairs. The nights I'd stared at the ceiling wondering if I'd ruin my life by going to HR. Mark watched my face. We could push to trial, he said. It's possible a jury would award more for you. It's also possible they'd award less or get hung up on something stupid, or we'd be tied up for another 2 years. This offer includes not just money but structural changes. What kind of changes? I asked. He ticked them off on his fingers for me to understand. Independent audits of HR practices for the next 3 years. A third-party hotline for harassment complaints that bypasses internal HR. Document retention policies that comply with best practices. Annual training that explicitly covers retaliation. And this is big reporting requirements to the court to prove they're actually doing it. So they can't just do a one-time seminar and call it a day, I said. Exactly, he said. There will be a paper trail this time whether they like it or not. I sat there, looking at that number. $180,000 wasn't never work again money. But it was pay off debt, breathe easier, stop choosing between co-pays and groceries money. I thought about the alternative. Another year or 2 of depositions, stress, anxiety. Getting up on a stand and having my entire life cross-examined in open court. It was a lot to consider. I also thought about the other women. Some still at Summit Ridge, keeping their heads down. Others out, trying to rebuild like I was. What do you think I should do? I asked Mark. He was honest with me. My job is to lay out the options. If this were me, I'd take the settlement. It's a solid outcome with real reforms. It sends a message. It doesn't erase what they did, but it makes them pay a cost they can't write off as a rounding error. I stared at the paper in my hand. For so long, it had felt like they had all the power and I had none. Now, for once, I had a choice they couldn't control. Okay, I said finally. For the first time, I felt like I was in charge. Let's settle, it was decided. The check at the same kitchen table. About 6 months later, a thick envelope showed up in our mailbox. Return address. The settlement administrator's office. I brought it upstairs like it was made of glass. Sat at the same wobbly kitchen table where I opened the deletion email. I sat where I'd stared at the class certification order. Emily hovered behind me, hands on my shoulders. You open it, I said. No way, she said. This is your kill. My fingers shook as I tore it open. Inside was a cover letter explaining the settlement. Inside was a breakdown of fees, and then a check. $126,700 and some change, after attorney's fees and estimated taxes. I just stared at it. For a second, it didn't feel real. It felt like a prop from someone else's movie. Emily's breath hitched at the sight. Is that? Yeah, I said. My voice cracked. It's real. She wrapped her arms around me from behind and we both started laughing and crying at the same time. We didn't go out and buy a Tesla. We didn't move into some downtown loft in the city. We did something way more radical for 2 millennials in Denver. We paid off my student loans. $24,000. Just gone. The weight that had been on my shoulders since college evaporated. We paid off Emily's car. We built a real emergency fund for us. We did this for the first time in our adult lives. We opened a savings account labeled House Maybe and put money in it, not as a fantasy but as a someday. And still weirdly, the money wasn't the part that made my chest ache the most. What got me was the letter Summit Ridge had to send to all current employees. They didn't admit wrongdoing, of course. Lawyers would rather swallow a stapler. But they explained that a settlement had been reached in a case alleging harassment, retaliation, and mishandled HR complaints for them. They outlined the new policies, the independent hotline, the audits, the training. Brad, I heard, resigned to pursue other opportunities about a month later. Marianne transitioned into a consulting role and then quietly disappeared from LinkedIn. Jess texted me the news. Jess, They just announced Brad's resignation. She said it was awkward in the all hands. People clapped, but not in a nice way. A couple days later, Jess, the new HR training mentions retaliation like 10 times. They even give examples. I thought I was going to vomit and laugh at the same time. Rachel and I met up at a bar near Cherry Creek Shopping Center to celebrate. We sat in a booth by the window, watching shoppers in expensive athleisure drift by. To the email, she said, raising her whiskey sour. To the email, I echoed. We clinked our glasses together. We laughed till we cried. And what I wish someone had told me. It's been a few years now. I eventually landed a new job, ironically, still in the data space, but at a fully remote company headquartered out of state. During onboarding, HR actually walked us through their complaint process in a way that sounded sincere. They emphasized that retaliation was grounds for termination. They encouraged us to report even small issues because small things are how big problems start. I remember sitting at my desk. I was sitting at my dining table turned desk, listening to that Zoom orientation, thinking, if Summit Ridge had meant half of what they put in their handbook, none of this would have happened. I still live in Denver. Still drive my beat-up Civic, though things are better. Emily and I have started touring neighborhoods and dreaming about where we might buy a tiny, overpriced house someday. Sometimes, if I'm in the area around the holidays, I'll drive past my old office park. The glass buildings are strung with generic white lights for everyone. The parking lot is full of people staying late to close out the quarter. I look up at the windows and picture another woman sitting in a beige conference room, twisting her hands, wondering if anyone will believe her. I hope she finds her own way. I hope she forwards herself the right email. I hope she finds a lawyer who listens. I hope she doesn't spend as many nights as I did wondering if she was crazy. Do I feel bad that Summit Ridge had to cut a check? Not even a little. They paid that bill with full knowledge of what they were doing every time they told someone, we can't substantiate this, and then quietly hit delete. They gambled that no one would ever see behind the curtain. They lost the bet. If you clicked on this video expecting a story about keying someone's car or dumping glitter in a cheating ex's apartment, I get it. That's what I used to think revenge meant too. Petty, loud, immediate. What I learned is that revenge isn't flashy. Sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't flashy at all. It's documentation. It's forwarding yourself emails. It's refusing to sign a severance agreement that muzzles you. It's finding other people who've been hurt by the same system and saying, what if we don't let them do this quietly? My revenge cost me months of sleep, a job I'd actually liked before Brad showed up, and more anxiety than I thought my body could hold. But it also did more. It exposed an HR department that was destroying complaints instead of protecting employees. It forced the company to change how it handled harassment, not just for me, but for everyone who comes after. It put real money in the hands of women who'd been punished for daring to say. This made me uncomfortable, and yeah, it makes me giddy. I'd be lying if I said it doesn't make me a little bit giddy to imagine some leadership offsite where they pull up a PowerPoint slide titled, Case Study, Why We No Longer Delete Complaint Notes, and some nervous HR director has to say something. She has to say, so, remember when we got sued? All because of one email they thought they could bury. So, if you're listening to this from a shitty studio apartment or a parked car on your lunch break, hear me when I say this clearly. Hear me as clearly as I can. You are not crazy. HR is not your therapist. HR is there to protect the company. Document everything. Write down dates, times, what was said. Forward emails to your personal account where you can for safety. Talk to a lawyer before you sign anything, especially if they're waving money at you to move on. Sometimes the difference between, we can't help you and we're settling a class action lawsuit is one overlooked email in a forgotten folder. I almost missed mine. I'm very, very glad I didn't. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you. If you've ever been burned by a company, harassed by a boss, or gaslit by HR, you're exactly who I told this for. There's one more part I haven't told you. The court filings, the check, the policy changes, that's the clean headline version. The company paid the price story. But revenge doesn't just end when the settlement clears. You still have to wake up next. You have to figure out who you are now that you're not just the girl who got fired for reporting harassment. After the lawsuit wrapped up, there were a couple of weird weeks where I felt floaty. For so long, Summit Ridge had been there. It was this constant buzzing presence in my head. First as my job, then as my trauma, then as my legal battle. Suddenly, my calendar didn't have call with Mark on it. No more letters from the court. No more panic attacks. No more panic every time an unknown 303 number called. Just space. You'd think that would feel amazing, and it did. In bursts. But there was also this strange emptiness. For the first time since I was 28, my life was different. My life wasn't being narrated internally as before they fired me and after they fired me. I was just Megan again. I didn't totally remember who that was. Applying for jobs with plaintiff on my resume, kind of. Things were new. When the case was public, one of my biggest fears had been, what if no one ever hires me again? Who wants to bring on someone who sued their last company? Mark had insisted that was in my head more than reality. Good companies see it as a sign you have a backbone, he'd said. Bad companies? You don't want to work there anyway. Still, when I finally updated my resume, I stared at the blank space where Summit Ridge Analytics used to sit. I wondered what the hell to do with it. I ended up doing what every good corporate survivor learns to do. I told the truth with the edges sanded down. In interviews when they asked about that 2-year gap, I had a response. I'd say, I left a toxic work environment, moved into contract work and temp roles while I dealt with a legal situation, and I'm finally in a place where I'm ready to commit long-term. If they pressed, I'd add more details. I brought forward a harassment complaint, and the company didn't handle it correctly. It turned into a legal matter that's been resolved. I watched their faces. Some interviewers stiffened just enough that I mentally crossed their company off my list. Others nodded. Others were serious. One hiring manager, a woman in her 50s at a fully remote tech company based out of Seattle, said, "I'm sorry that happened to you. We've implemented a third-party reporting system here for that exact reason. Nobody should choose." She said nobody should have to choose between their job and their safety. She hired me. I remember my first day at that new job so clearly. No commute. Just me at my little desk in Denver, looking at a welcome packet. I was looking at a Slack channel full of people sending GIFs and welcome Megan. HR did a Zoom walkthrough of benefits, then another session on company culture. When they got to harassment and discrimination policies, I braced myself for the worst. I expected the same corporate wallpaper I seen at Summit Ridge. Instead, the HR lead, somewhere in her early 40s, curly hair piled in a bun, speaking from a home office with a cat tower in the background, spoke with real authority to us. She said, "I want to be very clear. If you report something to us and feel like it's not being handled, you have a direct line to our external ombuds office. They don't report to us. They report to the board. Retaliation is grounds for immediate termination here, no matter who you are." My throat got tight in a way that surprised me. I wasn't planning on crying during Zoom orientation, but there I was, blinking hard at my webcam while she explained. She explained how to file a complaint if your boss is the problem. Nobody at that company knew yet that they'd hire someone who poured over HR policy like it was a sacred text now. But that's what Summit Ridge had done. What happened to everyone else? Every revenge story leaves people in its wake. Some you hear about. Some vanish back into their lives, and you just have to trust that they're okay. I still hear bits and pieces of the others. Jazz stayed at Summit Ridge for another year after the settlement. One night, she FaceTimed me from her kitchen in Aurora, hair thrown up, kids' artwork covering the fridge behind her. I'm leaving, she said, grinning. She had good news. I got an offer from a company in the tech center. 20% raise, actual flex hours, and their CEO didn't flinch when I asked about their harassment policy. What made you finally go? I asked her. She had a reason. She snorted. Honestly, the new HR training. What? They added this whole section about retaliation, right? She said. And the examples are so clearly about what they did to you that everyone kept side-eyeing each other in the room. It was funny. It was like, okay, so we all agree they were trash, yeah? I just realized I'd been waiting for them to become the company they pretend to be. They're not going to. So I left. She's happier now. She's doing well. She sends me photos from her new office when her team decorates for Broncos games. Rachel left too. She went to work for a nonprofit near Capitol Hill focusing on workplace equity. Of course she did. It was her path. Did your lawsuit inspire this? I asked once, half joking. She shrugged. I was always loud about this stuff, but watching you actually drag them into the light, it made me realize I wanted to be on the side of people. She wanted to be with those holding the flashlight, not the ones hiding in the dark. Tyler stayed. He's still at Summit Ridge, now with senior in front of his job title. He's still doing his thing over there. One night, he and I grabbed beers near Union Station when he was downtown for a client meeting. We sat under the string lights outside, watching trains slide in and out. Do you ever feel weird still working there? I asked. He shrugged, staring into his glass. Yes, all the time, he said. But my wife's in grad school. I've got 2 kids now. I need the paycheck. And it's different there. Not perfect, but different. It's changed a bit. Different how? He ticked things off. People actually report stuff now, he said. HR doesn't brush it under the rug as often. There's this external hotline that freaks management out enough that they think before they act. It's working. And when one manager made a gross comment in a meeting, he was gone in a month. He tasted his beer, then looked at me. I'm not saying they turned into saints, he said. But you scared them. That matters a lot. I nodded, feeling that weird mix of pride and guilt. I'm glad you're okay there, I said. He snorted. Define okay, he said. But yeah, better than it was. And hey, he had one more thing to say. He raised his glass. To you being the reason they say retaliation 15 times in every training module. We clinked glasses. The night the anger finally shifted. There's this specific memory I come back to when I think about it. It was the moment my anger stopped eating me alive and started just existing alongside everything else. It was a random Tuesday night about a year after the settlement. Emily was working late. I finished up my remote workday and walked. I walked over to Washington Park as the sun started to go down, earbuds in, listening to some true crime podcast. I ended up sitting on a bench near the lake. Kids were playing. Dogs were chasing each other. It was peaceful. Some guy was attempting to slackline between 2 trees and failing spectacularly. I opened Reddit on my phone, bad habit, and stumbled into a thread in Our Legal Advice. The post title was something like, "Fired after reporting harassment to HR. Is this legal?" My chest tightened. The details were different company, different industry, but the bones were familiar. Creepy supervisor, HR investigation that went nowhere. Suddenly performance issues. The top comments were a mix of good advice and internet nonsense. People were trying to help. Talk to an attorney. Start documenting. HR is not your friend. Just move on, it's not worth the stress. My thumb hovered over the comment box. For a year my entire life had been defined by this stuff. I had experience. I'd been the one asking strangers for advice, terrified and confused. Now, I actually had an answer, so I typed. I didn't tell them about the settlement amount or my case specifically. I didn't drop names. I shared my wisdom. I just wrote. I was in a very similar situation in Denver a few years ago. I reported harassment. HR did a half-hearted investigation, said they couldn't substantiate it. Then my performance reviews tanked and I was fired. It was tough. A few months later, I found an internal email from HR telling staff to delete notes about complaints involving directors. I took it to an employment lawyer. It turned into a class action suit. I fought back and won in the end. I'm not saying your situation will play out the same way. But please document everything. Get copies of your performance reviews. Save emails to your personal account if your employment agreement allows it. Talk to an employment attorney in your state now. Most do free consultations. HR protects the company, not you. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling and gather evidence. It can make all the difference later. I hit post. A random Reddit stranger replied, "Holy crap, thank you for this." Something about that made a knot in my chest loosen. For so long, everything that happened had felt like this horrible, shameful thing that I needed to either avenge or forget. That night, sitting on a park bench, I realized something important. I realized I didn't have to choose between those options. I'd already gotten my revenge. Now I could just pass the torch, hold the door open, whatever metaphor you want to use. I was moving on with my life finally. Maybe my story was just one more data point in a world where companies are used to getting away with this. But data points add up, and I'm a data person. I know what happens when a system gets enough inputs. I know what happens when they all point the same way. Eventually you stop being an outlier. Brad, somewhere out there. People always ask if I ever heard what happened to Brad. No, he didn't end up in handcuffs. No shaming. There wasn't some dramatic public shaming. One day, Jess texted me a screenshot of an internal email. "We'd like to thank Brad for his years of service and wish him well as he pursues other opportunities." 2 months later, he changed. His LinkedIn changed. New headline, new company. Different state. He landed at some consulting firm in Texas because of course he did. At first that made me furious. He got to just keep going? He just started over elsewhere. He started over somewhere else, like nothing happened. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized, he'll never be totally free of what happened. He might get new jobs, new titles, new teams to charm with his donuts. But somewhere in his mental rearview mirror there will always be a courthouse in Denver with a case that has his name in it. Somewhere, in some HR training at Summit Ridge, there will always be a slide that exists. It exists because of him. And somewhere, in a group chat among women who used to work for him and people like him, his name will always be shorthand for the one who thought he could get away with it. That's not the cinematic karmic justice we like to see on TV. It's quieter, pettier, but honestly, I can live with that. Final word. If this is you right now, I have a message for you if you're there. No gimmicks, no drama. Just what I wish someone had said to me when I was sitting in that HR office staring at the bowl of mini Snickers, wondering if I was overreacting. You are not overreacting. Trust yourself. Your body knows when a line's been crossed, even if your brain is desperately trying to rationalize it away for the sake of your paycheck. When they tell you we couldn't substantiate it, what they often mean is the opposite. They mean we didn't want to find it. When they promise we don't tolerate retaliation, what they often mean is, we hope you won't notice what happens next. So, write everything down. Dates, times, exact words. Keep your records. Keep copies of emails, performance reviews, Slack messages, anything that shows how you were treated before and after you spoke up. Don't rely on HR to explain your rights to you. Talk to an actual employment attorney in your state. Be proactive. Most will tell you straight up if you have a case or not. Do not sign anything you don't understand just because they put a number at the bottom and call it severance. That number might be cheap for them. It's cheap compared to what they're really trying to protect themselves from. Most of all, do not let them convince you that protecting yourself is some kind of betrayal. They will talk about team culture and loyalty and family. Families don't delete your complaints and fire you for being inconvenient. Companies do, and sometimes, if you're really unlucky, they BCC you on the email where they admit it. That's when the story can change for you. That's when you get to decide whether your pain becomes just another secret they bury, or the crack in the dam that finally makes it all flood out. If this story hit home, you're exactly who I told it for. If you want more real revenge stories, messy, complicated, and actually about people getting justice instead of just a moment of pettiness, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. This is for you.